The Donut Bag is brought to you by Penn Highway Marketplace, the marketplace for vintage goods, quality collectibles, and handmade crafts. It's where I get all my sports memorabilia. Go to facebook.com/Penn Highway. That's facebook.com/PENNHWY and mention I sent you. So the Penguins have been on, I want to say a roller coaster. Yeah, maybe a roller coaster. It was really down and now it looks like up. Vince, are the Penguins about where you expected them to be at the beginning of the season?
They are. I figured they would be a fringe playoff team, but they've gone about it in a completely different way than I thought they would. They had a 5-0 run there, and then they lost a bunch of games in a row. I kind of figured they would alternate wins and losses, but in the end, right now, they are about where I would expect them to be in like a 7th, 8th playoff type of seed.
The race is crazy. I think they're tied right now with like 6 other teams with the exact same points. Do you think right now they'll make the playoffs? Because right now it looks touch and go.
I do. I think that the Capitals, the Islanders, and maybe the Flyers are going to drop off, particularly the Islanders. I just don't see it with them. They do have a great goaltender, don't get me wrong, but I just don't see how they can sustain what they're doing right now. I think they have like 9 or 10 loser points. They have like 9 overtime losses. I don't see that they could sustain the way that they're getting points the way they are. The Capitals, they're right there with the Penguins, but I actually think that they're a worse team than the Penguins, and they just don't have the firepower that the Penguins do. And the Flyers, I mean, we saw what the Penguins did to the Flyers the other night. Now I know the Flyers beat the Penguins earlier this year, but I don't think the Flyers are quite ready for prime time yet. So I think at least 1 or 2 of those teams are going to drop out. I do think that New Jersey's probably going to jump back into a playoff spot at some point. So, there is definitely a lot of posturing to happen before the end of the season here. But I do think the Penguins are talented enough to make the playoffs, probably as a 7-8 seed, especially with the way their goaltending has been playing this season.
That goaltending has been amazing, and I think that surprised everyone. I was pretty upset when they brought back Jari. I was never a fan of his, and it's not perfect, but Ned, my goodness, what a surprise! It seemed it's like, did they have a number 1 and number 2, or are they both both like 1A and 1B?
Yeah, I think right now it's 1A and 1B. You look at what Dubas did in the offseason, and when you looked around at who was available, Jari probably was the best goalie available. At the time, I was a little weary of the signing myself, especially 5 years for somebody who really is quite honestly not proven himself. The signing of Nedeljkovic was brilliant. I mean, when you look at the best goalies that were out there and available as free agents, Nedeljkovic probably was the best goalie out there available. And I mean, to see the way that these two have played this year, it's paying dividends what Dubas did. And, quite honestly, and this is not a knock on Jari and the way he's played this year, because I think he's played very well. I think Nedeljkovic is the better goaltender. I think that he just has the more raw talent, and I think that he looks more confident when he's in net. Now, as the season has gone on, I think Jari has looked more confident, but I do think Nedeljkovic is the slightly better goalie than Jari.
I just love that he's Ned is there, because I think in previous years, Jari, you look at Casey DeSmith, and you never thought, oh, he could challenge for the number 1 role. No, never. He was always going to be the 2. Well, now you have someone right there, because it seems like, I mean, I've heard the phrase January Jari. I hope that's really not a thing, but for whatever reason, he does seem to play worse, like toward the January, February, March, April. So if he does that this time, it's like, okay, we'll just we'll just throw Ned in there, and so maybe that'll push him a little bit more.
Yeah, and I give Mike Sullivan credit. he could very easily say Jari's my number one goalie, and despite how well Ned's playing, he could keep on playing Jari. But he's giving Nedeljkovic pretty much every other game at this point. So I give Sullivan credit for that, because I think maybe in the past he was a little reluctant to do that. Now, granted, he's never had a great backup goaltender like Nedeljkovic, but I do give Sullivan credit for basically splitting the starts and letting Nedeljkovic get games.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, Another amazing thing is how Sidney Crosby and really Malkin too are still bringing it at a high level at their age.
Yes.
It's amazing. It's amazing. And like it's just amazing that we've been seeing these guys for, my goodness, almost 20 years now, and they're still playing at a high level. It's like, they had there was that one game against Toronto where they got destroyed, and I think that was a turning point.
7-0 game.
Yeah, 7-0 game. And also the Kyle Dubas press conference where he basically said, we'll see how things go we'll evaluate things until the off season,
Yes.
until the All-Star break. And I think I think that sent a pretty big message. And ever since then, the team has played really well. And, they basically went from maybe having a sell-off to maybe becoming buyers at the trade deadline. But it's just amazing that Crosby and Malkin are playing at this level. I mean, they're talking about Crosby for MVP, for goodness sake.
I mean, and you're leaving Chris Letang out of that conversation too. I mean, he set the NHL record for most assists by a defenseman in a period. I mean, it's really amazing. And the one amazing thing when you look at Evgeny Malkin this season is his play in the defensive zone. At one point a couple weeks ago, he actually had the best face-off winning percentage of any forward in the NHL in the defensive zone. Like, where did that come from? Sidney Crosby. I mean, he is literally playing the same way today at the age of 36 that he was when he was 19. It's just amazing. I mean, that play that he made last week to beat out the icing call, that just kind of summarizes, who Sidney Crosby is and the type of game that he plays. So, I mean, it's pretty amazing. Malkin, there were a few lulls in his game this season. He had a couple, 3-4 game stretches where he didn't kind of look the part. But, I mean, overall, he's been great. I mean, it is amazing. Like you said, I mean, these three guys have been playing together for the better part of 2 decades. And usually, when you see this, I mean, you see it in other sports too, like Miguel Cabrera with the Tigers. It's like, okay, yeah, he's on the team and he's been there forever, but he's a shell of his former self. I mean, these guys are still, top 50, in Sidney Crosby's case, top 5 NHL, players in the NHL. And it's just amazing. And anybody who says like, oh, they shouldn't have re-signed these guys, I don't know who you would have gotten that is any better than these guys. I mean, okay, you talk about Trocheck and they're similar. They're similar numbers. I mean, I don't begrudge the Penguins, for re-signing these guys at all. And they're really, the top players on the team. And it was that way last season too. It wasn't Malkin, Crosby, Letang that were the problem last season. Right. Or this season, it's the the supporting cast that's the problem. And last year was the goaltending. At least this season, the goaltending's been better.
Yeah. Crosby's Malkin's roles have been kind of the same. They're playing with the same people, so not much of a change for them. But for Letang,
yes,
with Karlsson coming in, everything had to change for him. Every other year he's been like the guy, the number one defenseman, the offensive guy on defense. And now you got another guy who's, with bigger stature, who won a Norris Trophy, who had all these, all these goals, all these points. And Letang is thriving, and it's awesome. It's just you got to give him a lot of credit, because that could have gone a different way.
Yeah, I mean, so much credit has to be given to Chris Letang. I mean, not only for the way he keeps himself in shape, I mean, battling through strokes and health issues. And, he could have easily had a bruised ego when Erik Karlsson came here, but he embraced it. He's like, I want to play with this guy. I mean, this guy's won Norris trophies. I want to play with this guy. And, quite honestly, he's played better than Erik Karlsson. And I'm not knocking Erik Karlsson. I mean, he's like a plus 11 on the season. You can't beat that really. And Letang's a plus 9. But I think it's actually going to be good for Letang in the long term because, I mean, I know his numbers are still way up there, but it's taking a little bit of ice time away from him. And that maybe 1 minute a game that he, where Karlsson's going out there for the first power play, those minutes add up at the end of the season. And maybe he'll be a little bit more fresh at the end of the season. But, to be quite honest with you, I think that Letang should probably be manning that first power play unit and Karlsson the second. I don't know what it is with Karlsson. He just doesn't seem to look comfortable out there on that first power play unit, which is crazy to say for a guy who's won 3 Norris trophies and had 100 points last year. But, he's flubbing the puck. He just doesn't seem to, be able to make quick decisions with the puck. Whereas you watch Letang this season, I mean, as evidenced by the 5-assist game or the 6-assist game, I should say. He looks so confident out there. Maybe it's time to switch those two. Just maybe even if it's just temporary, just to see how it works, because obviously that power play needs something.
Yeah, that power play needs something. I mean, it when things were bad, that power play was basically like sinking the season. Like you can't do that. You can't go all these games without scoring a power play goal. It's just not sustainable. And it's just, how on earth do you have a bad power play with some of the most skilled players in the league?
There's 4 future Hall of Famers.
Yeah. It's ridiculous. Yeah, Karlsson, I think I think he's still in the adjustment period. I think he's still trying to find his role. I mean, I saw that he's on pace for 60 points or something like that. And I think last year he had like 100 points. I mean, that's pretty bad when you have a 40% drop.
Well, I mean, 100 points is obviously not realistic, but
yeah.
I think I know other people have talked about this too, but sometimes it's a little bit different for defensemen and adjustment periods, because I think Ryan Graves is going through this same adjustment period, and he's been awful. I mean, just to put it the way it is, he's been awful. But I go back to, and I know other people have talked about this too, that first year that Gonchar was here, I mean, when you were watching Gonchar that first year he was here, it was like, what are we going to do with this guy for the next 4 years? He's awful. And then, of course, he turns out to be the Hall of Fame defenseman that he will be someday. And I think that's what's going on with Karlsson and Graves. I mean, obviously Karlsson is the more talented of those two, but I think that they're both going through an adjustment period. And I'm hoping that by, the last quarter of the season, that both of them will kind of start to live up to expectations.
Paul Martin too. Remember that?
Oh yeah,
same thing. It's like horrible the first year, and then they were awesome the second year. Karlsson's doing, okay. I the one thing I like about Karlsson is, I mean, it just seemed like he had that reputation of, all offense and defense be damned, and for him to be a plus 11, that's pretty impressive. So I mean, the defense just, it's not as bad as we thought it would. But Graves, wow. I mean,
he's been dropped to the third pair now, and I mean, he's literally bringing down whoever he plays with. And to the point now where P.O. Joseph is forced to play in a top 4 role, and I don't think he's ready for that. And not to mention the fact he's not that kind of stay-at-home defenseman that Pettersson is. He's got kind of an offensive mindset of his own, and he doesn't really have the physical presence to be that kind of stay-at-home defenseman like Pettersson either. So, if you're looking for moves at the deadline, that could be one of them. I know Ludwig is eventually going to come back and maybe he gets slotted into that top 4 role. But, I was looking at the stats a little bit earlier today. He's a -7 in pretty limited action. And I don't know if that's a guy you want playing in your top 4. So maybe you could go out and get one of the stay-at-home defensemen. Now they're very hard to find. Like, for instance, I was looking at like, what Radko Gudas's contract looks like with Anaheim, because obviously Anaheim's having a terrible season. 4 million a year for the next 2 years after this year. I don't think they're going to be going out and doing that. I'm thinking they might be going out and getting a guy more along the lines of like a Robert Bortuzzo, $950,000 a year, just, for some insurance. But, obviously the Penguins are hoping Graves turns it around and he can slot back into that top four role. But right now he's just really, really struggling.
It's so frustrating too, because he's a big dude,
Mm-hmm.
6'5", 220. And what is it about physical big people when they come to the Pittsburgh, they automatically like lose all their phicality?
Yeah,
We've
they
seen it
they
so
turn
many
into
times.
they turn into guys that want to make fancy passes.
Yeah.
And, I mean, we even used to see that to a much lesser extent. Like guys like Brooks Orpik and Ryan Whitney way back in the day. They're trying to make these fancy passes, and I'm not by any means comparing Ryan Graves to Brooks Orpik, but it's just so weird. You almost want to like take the heart of a guy like a Patrick Hornquist and stick it in Ryan Graves and, see what that defenseman looks like, because you're right. Like, to be blessed with that physical skill set and to go out there and be so soft, it's very frustrating to watch.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny you say so soft. This is the anniversary of the Michel Therrien rants.
The
So,
18th anniversary. I
so,
can't remember. I might have been in the visitors locker room that night, but I remember like immediately after the game, you're like, you got to see this.
was it was epic, epic. I just watched it a little bit ago. It's like, oh, this just the accent, the way he said something. Oh, it was just perfect. I just, yeah, we would with my friends. We would just recite that speech all the time.
Yeah, I used to love talking to him after games. He just told it like it was, and didn't care who who he was offending, or who heard his message. He was a great guy to talk to.
He kind of was the perfect coach for at the time.
Yes.
Crosby was just starting, Malkin was just starting. They were all young and impressionable, and he was that hard guy that was just really, really abrasive and gruff and really hard on them, which is kind of what they needed. And that somebody like that, he's not going to stay there forever, but for the short time, he did a good job.
Yeah, that group, it was so young, they needed that tough love. And like you said, coaches like that, they have an expiration date. And once these guys that, Malkin, Crosby, Letang blossom into these kind of superstar players, they don't want a hard-nosed coach like that anymore.
No.
That's why John Tortorella's had so many jobs. He's great for a team that's rebuilding and to get them to a certain point. And I know obviously he's won a Stanley Cup, but that a guy like that's not going to stick around with the same group of guys for 17 years or 10 years even. But he was the right coach at the right time, that's for sure.
Well, I've heard a lot of people say that maybe Sullivan shouldn't be the coach but they've turned it around, and I've been critical because it seems like they play the same style. They refuse to change, but it seems like they're more grinders now, more
Yes.
physical. Maybe that's helped them win a lot of games lately.
Yeah, I think in the last like 10 to 15 games, they've definitely changed up their style a little bit. Now, it does help that they got all those guys back from injury, the Russ and those fourth line guys. And that certainly helps. But I do think that there's a noticeable difference in the way that they played early on in the season compared to like the last 10 to 15 games. And, that's a credit to him. Listen, Sullivan, I can guarantee you, preaches to these guys. You just go back to the power play for a minute, to just shoot the puck, like get pucks on net, make the simple play. But these guys get out there and they just do whatever the heck they want. And one of the worst things that could have happened is that power play goal they scored on Monday night, where
the Malkin one behind
behind the back pass through the crease that just happened to land on Rickard Rakell's stick. It's like, oh,
Now they're
look
going to
at
try that
her.
1,000 times, and
Yep.
it's not going to work any of those times.
Uh,
It'll work that one time, so they're going to keep trying it.
and then, of course, the next 5 power plays after that looked like complete garbage, and they almost gave up a shorthanded goal. So, but I've asked Mike Sullivan many times, like, do you think that your team passed up too many opportunities to shoot on the power play tonight? And every time it's yes. And the other night they did have against Buffalo almost 50 shots on goal, but they also had, I think it was like 6 power play opportunities that night, including that 5-on-3. They did not have any quality shots on those power plays except for the 5-on-3, where, I mean, you have a full 2 minutes of 5-on-3, you're more than likely going to score eventually. So I don't even count that as like a successful power play.
Yeah.
So, I think Sullivan preaches certain things to this team. And because of the group, the very veteran group that they have, they kind of just go out and do their own thing a lot of times. And the only guys that are really listening are the third and fourth line guys that, aren't getting more than 10 minutes a night.
Right. Right. Jake Guentzel, his contract is up at the end of this season. Do you think they'll extend him? Possibly trade him? I don't know. I mean, that's a very interesting situation.
Yeah. I mean, if they're in a playoff spot, I just don't see how you could trade him. Like, I understand the business aspect of it 100%, but if you're in a 7th, 8th, even 9th spot and come the trade deadline, I don't see how you trade him and say that you're making your team better. I think that they would be lucky to get him at $10 million a season, given what I've seen with the Nylander contract. I think 10 million is probably the sweet spot. And you would probably have to give him 8 years, which, I mean, my goodness, he's going to be like 38 at the end of the contract.
No.
But at the same time, maybe in his mind, he's thinking, I'm not going to play with anybody better than Sidney Crosby. Maybe he signs for 5 years instead of 8, or something like that. It's gonna be tough. I know the salary cap's going up, but you've got a lot of guys making a lot of money on this team. I mean, maybe a guy like Brian Rust is a casualty, and they have to trade him away, because something's gonna have to give. And what do you re-sign Nadalkovich at the end of the season? I don't know if you're going to be able to afford him the way this season that he's having.
Right.
So,
Right.
There's going to be a lot of tough decisions to make. But I mean, if this team is truly thinking that they are still in a window of being a contender, I don't know how you, one, trade him away, and two, not re-sign him.
Really, yeah. Trading during the season is just not a possibility. If they do decide to part ways, the only thing you say is like, okay, it frees up 6 million on now we have 6 million to spend somewhere else. But I heard something that said he's just weighing it out to see what's going on. And I think maybe he just wants to see is like, well, what's going on with Sid? I mean, Sid's contract is up at the end of next year.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously, when we think that he's going to stick around, I mean, Malkin and Letang are here till 27, 28. So you figure at least, Crosby would be around till then. So, but yeah, I'm fine with 5 years, 50 million, maybe a 6-year contract. But you go to 8 years with a dude that's 29.
Yeah.
Look what happened with Jeff Carter. The guy in his late 30s just fell off a cliff. Like, that's scary. Especially they give away no trade contracts like it's candy.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, the only thing that you could think about if you sign him to an 8-year deal, like once Crosby, Malkin, Letang, those guys aren't here anymore, maybe you trade Guentzel for a first-round pick during your rebuilding. I mean, there's that possibility as well. But yeah, I mean, I would think that Crosby's going to sign an extension to his contract. I mean, he'll probably play till he's 41, 42 years old, I would think. And obviously, I think that he would, at the very least, sign a contract to coincide with the end of Letang and Malkin's contracts. So I don't think he's going anywhere. And I think obviously Sidney Crosby would love to have Jake Guentzel here too. So that might play a huge factor in it as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Uh, Reilly Smith has been a pretty big disappointment. He started off great and then it just went to crap. And now he's on the third line. But Drew O'Connor, I didn't see this coming. I didn't think it would ever click with him, but it sure looks like they might have found something there that, a permanent guy in the top six.
Yeah, I'm going to take sole credit for Drew O'Connor's sudden resurgence because I called him a jabroni 2 weeks ago. And
He saw that. I'll
yeah,
show
he
him.
must have seen that. I don't know, it was a private text message between me and one of my friends, but he must have somehow seen it. And yeah, now he looks like he's a legitimate top six winger. And I mean, he's great. He's getting in there on the forecheck. He's setting up goals. He's scoring goals. I mean, it's just like a light bulb went off over this guy's head or something. And unfortunately, the exact opposite has happened for Reilly Smith. And I was so excited about Reilly Smith coming here because I watched a lot of Vegas Golden Knights game. I actually was in Vegas for the Stanley Cup last year when they won the cup. And I watched a lot of their games. And, every night when he was in Vegas, he was on the score sheet, either a big penalty kill, a blocked shot, a goal, an assist. And he started out great here. I was like, man, look at this chemistry that him and Malkin have. And I think he's got like 2 goals in his last 26 games or something. What I'm hoping is, and I mean, this is just completely out there, but they're going to Vegas in next weekend, the Penguins, and maybe a trip to Vegas. I'm sure they'll do some sort of like welcome back to Vegas, Reilly. Maybe that'll jumpstart him. Maybe playing in that building will get him going again because the talent is there. Like he is a good hockey player. And like I said, I mean, when he was with Vegas, every night he was on the score sheet one way or the other. So the same thing we talked about with Graves and Karlsson. I'm hoping that he finds this game too because he's a solid player. I mean, when I was on a different show earlier in the year, they asked me what was I most excited about from the offseason acquisitions. I said Reilly Smith, hands down. And unfortunately, he's been a pretty big disappointment the last like 20 games or so.
Yeah, it's weird. It's weird, especially since he started off so hot.
Yes.
Him and Malkin were just on fire, and then who knows? It's just maybe he's just unlucky or something like that. But a newcomer who is really really doing well, Lars Eller.
Yes.
Not what we think of as the ideal third line center, but still, hey, good defensively, a little bit offense, but still, I think he's the perfect in that third line center role.
Yeah, and he's it's great to have those veteran guys on the third and fourth line. Now you don't want 6 veterans on the third and fourth line because you'll just get skated out of the building. But to have a guy like that, anchoring your third line, and I've been surprised by his offensive ability. I mean, I think he's already scored more goals than I expected from him this year, and we're not even halfway through the season. I think that was a great acquisition. I think that he really kind of cements that third line. And you noticed when he wasn't in there, when he was out for those few games when he was hurt, it was a noticeable drop off in play for that third line when he wasn't there. So I think that he is the perfect third line guy. Or in his earlier years, yeah, he's a top 6 guy. But for his age, he is a solid third line guy that can occasionally contribute on offense, but he's going to be defensively responsible as well.
Perfect person for the playoffs if they get in. He'd be perfect for that. It's a very interesting third line right now. Lars Eller, Reilly Smith, and Puustinen. Puustinen, I think, is I think if he's going through that Drew O'Connor cycle, it's going to be a while till he catches on. But
yeah,
maybe hopefully he'll just stick with the big club. They need young people.
Yeah, I think, and there's just not room for him right now, I don't think. But I think Puustinen is best served in a top 6 role. I don't really think that he's kind of got the he's not built to be a third or fourth line guy. Now he did have a great forecheck in the Flyers game the other night that led to a goal. And I agree with you. I think just having those young legs on the team is very helpful, regardless if he's on the second line, third line, whatever. But I think that the type of game that he plays is best served playing probably with Evgeny Malkin. But I do understand why he's on the third line also.
Yeah. Yeah. What do you think? I mean, not for the trade deadline is literally, I think, 2 months away, but and they are right up against the cap. I think they're like 200,000 in space, so they don't have much
Not
space.
much.
But what do you think they should try to get in the trade deadline if they're buyers?
Yeah, I think that they need to get another kind of stay-at-home type defenseman. Like I said, obviously a guy like Radko Gudas or somebody cut from that type of cloth would be great, but you have to trade somebody on the roster away in order to do that. That's probably the number one thing that they need. It's nice that for a change, it's not a backup goaltender. I think another speedy guy, speedy yet physical guy to fill out that third and fourth line, maybe. Those would be my two biggest things, I think. It's funny to say because right now they're not even in a playoff spot, but I don't think that there's as many holes on this team as people maybe think there are. I think that it's a pretty well balanced and well rounded team, but
Yeah.
certainly if they could pick up another like top four defensive defenseman, that would really help. And like I said, if you could find another guy with speed, it doesn't even have to be necessarily be a young guy. That we saw back when they won the cup, they brought in Carl Hagelin. He wasn't like 18 years old or anything at that time, but he was one of the fastest guys in the league. So, either speed or some sort of physical element for the third or fourth line. If you could get a guy that has both speed and a physical element, that would be great. But I don't think that there's too many guys out there like that. So those would be my kind of top shopping list items for the trade deadline.
Yeah. I mean, even the fourth line is not that bad. Jeff Carter is finally in a good role. He's not,
Hey.
when you don't make him the third line center, when you put him in the fourth line, he's actually not bad.
Yeah, 7 or 8 minutes of Jeff Carter is just enough in a night.
Perfect.
And, hey, listen, I watch him take faceoffs, and I still play hockey, and listen, the way that he takes faceoffs and his technique. I mean, he's 39 years old, but he's still winning the majority of his faceoffs. Like it's watching him take faceoffs is like an art form. Just take a minute when you're watching a game. Anybody who's listening, watch Jeff Carter take faceoffs. It's really kind of quite amazing to watch the way he takes faceoffs, the way he shifts his hands, the way he shifts his body weight. I mean, it's no coincidence that the Penguins are one of the top faceoff teams in the league. They're probably learning a lot from Jeff Carter.
Probably. That is one area Crosby is improved on this year. He was pretty
Yes.
poor in faceoffs previously, and this year he's been really good. So yeah, yeah, we will see. I'm just happy that they're in it. It's going to be exciting. I'm just happy that they're not a joke. They've always been either in a playoff spot or near one for the past 20 years
20
now.
years.
So it's great to see. So
Yeah, they got this the West Coast trip coming up, and a lot of the times, over the seasons, these West Coast swings where it's a 4 or 5 game road trip, they oftentimes will be a turning point for the season one way or the other. So it'll be interesting to see what happens on this next West Coast swing that's coming up.
yeah, and the wild card in all this is Dubas. This is new for him too. We don't know what he's going to be like we know what he was like as a GM at the trade deadline with Toronto, but we don't know what he's going to be like now. And I think it's like he said, he's like, well, we'll see how things are until the All-Star break. It's like, well, they responded, so it's like, okay, who I heard today is available again, Jacob Chikrin.
Really?
I don't know what's
Again?
like how is he available again? We just went through this. Maybe they could do some crazy
Hey,
thing and pull off a trade for him because I heard obviously last year the Penguins were well, we'll see we don't know how much they were in on him, but also Toronto was last year. So maybe Dubas really likes him. I don't know. That could be interesting.
it's going to be real interesting because I can't. He could literally go anywhere from like making a single move to get a fourth line guy all the way to like trading Reilly Smith away, who he just got
Right.
in the offseason to make some sort of blockbuster trade. Like
Right.
you just don't. I mean, he's a cowboy, man. It's like the Wild West with Dubas. I mean, obviously it's very calculated what he's doing, but he's not afraid to make moves at all.
Well, the Carlson the Carlson trade, he should be like in a jail or something like that because that was getting rid of all the bad contracts and getting Carlson and making it all fit into the cap. That was wizardry.
Yeah, I mean, for anybody who wants to complain about, Erik Karlsson's play this year, first off, I mean, come on, he's plus 11 and he's doing well.
Would you
Second,
rather have Mikhail Granlund or
yeah, second, just think about all the guys that were gotten rid of off of this roster because of the Erik Karlsson trade, and then, come back to me with your opinion.
yeah. Yeah, it was addition by addition and addition by subtraction. My goodness, that was
Exactly.
amazing. So, all right. Hey, it was great talking to you. Thanks for coming on. How can people find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter. My Twitter handle, or X, whatever we're calling it these days, is at PGHVC. And I write for Stan Fischler, the Fischler Report. Basically, you could just the easiest way to do it, just Google the Fischler Report. It's free. You just put your email address in, and you'll get the Fischler Report when it's published.
Yeah, and you have great tweets about the Penguins. So
Thank you.
yeah, yeah, make
Hey,
sure to
I'm
follow.
glad to be on anytime.
All right. Hey, thanks for coming on.
All right, thank you.
See you.
Bye.